Good morning. Good morning. Habari za asubuhi. Ko salama? Dancing in the morning was not on my bingo cards, but thank you to the MCs for such a vibrant start of the day. I wish I was given the memo. You're all looking so lovely and colorful in your African print. So yeah, thank you so much. As mentioned, my name is Abigail Kima. I think my bio has been read extensively, so I'm here on behalf of myself. I wear many hats. As mentioned, I host and produce a climate and energy podcast. I am a young person like most of us in the room, and I also work at Hivos under a program called Voices for Just Climate Action. I would have loved to be here yesterday and today the whole day, but unfortunately I can only be here for this session as we have another meeting ongoing in the office. I did prepare a speech, so kindly allow me to read it. Just because I can't do it off the top of my head. So, climate action now, a very common phrase, but what does that actually mean for young people? Africa has the world's youngest population with over 60% of its people under the age of 25. I see this as a great resource for Africa. This morning, we opened the conversation with the voice of youth leadership, a voice that carries both the urgency of lived realities and the hope of possibility. Across Africa and the world, young people are driving bold climate solutions, building clean energy enterprises, advancing adaptation technologies, restoring ecosystems, and mobilizing communities for justice. Yet, we remain underrepresented in funding and policy spaces that decide our future. I don't want this to be another speech that will not be memorable, a speech where I remind you what you already know. I believe all of us in the room are here for a reason, and you've learned a lot since the first day of the conference, and so we already all know what we are here for. We know what climate solutions are, we know what youth leadership is. And we know that the climate crisis is one of the biggest challenges of our time. It's almost as if us as young people have inherited, or rather, we are inheriting the impacts of bad decisions that were made by the generation that came before us. And the latest IPCC report said, IPCC being Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, which is basically the scientific body that shows evidence that climate change is happening. Because we still have people who deny that climate change is not real, including the president, who we know who. And it says that about 3.6 billion people live in context of vulnerability to the impacts of climate change. And that statistic includes most of us here in Africa. We know Africa, we keep saying this particular statement. Africa has contributed less than 4% of the global emissions, yet the impacts that we feel are quite severe. When you look at it, 4% out of about 54 plus countries in Africa, yet only 4% is what we contribute. But the impacts that we continue to feel are quite severe. From flash floods in Nairobi, for example, last year, to the cyclones in Mozambique that continue to happen every rainy season, almost every rainy season, to prolonged droughts in northern part of Kenya, northern part of Africa. But then the issue is, nobody wants to talk about who funds the problem, who funds the mitigation, who funds the adaptation for Africa. And because of the impacts of the climate crisis, it means a lot of families continue to lose their livelihoods, whether it is losing livestock for pastoralist communities, whether it is losing homes during flash floods, whether it is losing, completely the livelihood in the homesteads completely changing because of the impacts of climate change. And I know some of us in this room have living testimonies of these impacts of climate change. And I believe that is why most of us here are trying to find solutions for our own communities. Unfortunately, when we talk about climate finance, the flow of resources tells a different story. Promises remains unfulfilled, access remains unequal. The fund, meant to build resilience in vulnerable communities such as ourselves, are too often stuck behind layers of bureaucracy, while youth-led and women-led initiatives that are proven, practical, and impactful struggle to survive on passion rather than support. And that is why I love the tagline, shifting power. Can you feel power shifting in the room? Can you feel the power shifting in the room? Good. Access remains unequal. And therefore, this is a space that allows us to interrogate who controls the finance, who gets to decide, and what it would take to fund African youth-led solutions at scale. But this is not just about access to money, it is also access to power, the power and the agency of the youth to shape policies, priorities, and programs that define our collective responses to the climate emergency. And for too long, young people have been called leaders of tomorrow, but tomorrow is already here. We are the largest generation in history. We are innovators, scientists, creatives, content creators, activists, mobilizers, name them, including tech bros. But we are not waiting to act, we are already acting. And what we are demanding now is trust, investment, and inclusion. A true power shift means moving from tokenism to trust. And I know we've talked about tokenism a lot in this conference. From consultation to co-creation. We don't just want to be given a seat at the table, we actually want to co-create with the people in power. And from promises to partnerships. It means designing equitable and gender-transformative finance systems where women, girls that are too often left behind, as well as youth, are recognized as key actors, implementers, and not just beneficiaries. We no longer want to be beneficiaries of climate solutions only, but we want to be implementers and collaborators. And it means building locally led finance models that strengthen community ownership, transparency, and accountability. And it means creating shared responsibility between youth, policymakers, and donors to ensure that climate finance works for people and not just for the statistic. And there are many good examples of youth-led climate action that I have personally captured on the Hali Hewa podcast. One example is a story of youth and urbanism. This particular group of young people work in the informal settlement in Nairobi city in Mathare. And what they are doing is, we never really think about the impacts of climate change in urban settlements because we are always used to the conversations of climate change being about agriculture or, being in the rural areas. But imagine people who have been brought up and bred up in the informal settlements across different African cities. And so they're really trying to help us understand what the impacts of climate change manifests as in these particular areas. And what they're doing is, one, creating awareness, of course, and we live in a very digital age, and therefore they're using podcasts, they have a radio station, they also have come up with a group of girls who are able to respond during climate emergencies. And one of the stories that is quite inspirational for me about this particular group of young people is that during Kenya's flash floods last year, they were able to help families resettle, because this particular group of young people, or rather young ladies and women, had been trained, so they understood the issues of climate change. And when it came to the season where a lot of demolitions was happening, for example in Mathare, they were able to come together and really try and resettle some of these families by supporting them with the little funding that they had received. Remember, funding young people. Another group that I've also profiled is called the Timao group, who are transforming plastic waste to building blocks. And I can obviously share all this through the links. And this is just to mention a few. And I know there are so many other youth-led solutions in the room that we can possibly amplify and scale up to ensure that we are implementing climate solutions that work for our communities. So today, as we open this session, let us imagine what it would look if young people were not on the sidelines, but on the driver's seat, leading climate finance design, influencing policy, and redefining what inclusive and just climate action truly means. So I would encourage us to let this be a dialogue where we get to exchange ideas, share experiences, and learn from one another. The power shift begins here. Are we ready? Are we ready? Awesome. Thank you so much.